The emergency klaxons had been silent for exactly 4 minutes when Commander Rolf realized the coalition was losing the war. His clawed hand trembled over the tactical display, showing 3 core worlds reduced to ash and debris fields where cities once stood. 40 years of military service across a dozen campaigns had taught the old Saurian many things, but nothing had prepared him for the swarm. Another distress call from Haven Colony, announced Ambassador Tella, her feathered crest drooping in exhaustion. The Avarian diplomat had stopped sleeping 3 days ago when the casualty reports started arriving in waves. They're requesting immediate evacuation. Swarm forces have breached the northern continent. Rolf's tail swept across the floor in frustration. We have no ships available. Every transport is already overloaded with refugees from the previous 7 systems. He pulled up the latest engagement reports and felt his blood run cold. 70% casualties in every single battle. The swarm didn't negotiate, didn't retreat, and apparently didn't feel pain. Lieutenant Broad stepped forward, his mantid exoskeleton clicking with barely contained anger. "Commander, my warriors are ready to deploy. Give us authorization and we'll hold Haven Colony until reinforcements arrive." The young officer's compound eyes burned with determination that Rolf recognized from countless doomed last stands. "Reinforcement from where, Lieutenant?" Rolf asked quietly. "We've committed everything. The swarm outnumbers us 50-1 on every front, and their coordination is perfect. They're a hive mind. They think faster than we can react." The room fell silent except for the ambient hum of station systems. 200 species had joined the coalition over 6 centuries, building a civilization based on cooperation and mutual defense. In 3 weeks, the swarm had shattered that illusion of safety. They were going to lose everything. And everyone in this room knew it. "There might be another option," Tella said softly. She activated a classified file that made several officers lean forward in surprise. "Intelligence has been tracking a particular species that recently joined the coalition. Their combat effectiveness against the swarm is statistically impossible." Rolf examined the data with growing disbelief. 98% survival rate? That has to be an error. No species maintains those numbers against the swarm. He scrolled through engagement reports, each one more improbable than the last. Small human units defeating swarm clusters 10 times their size. Human casualties healing and returning to combat within days. Human tactics that seem to ignore basic military doctrine. "It's verified," Tella insisted. "I've personally reviewed the combat footage. Commander, these humans fight like nothing I've ever seen." General Quinn had been sitting silently in the corner throughout the entire meeting, observing with those unsettling human eyes that seemed to track everything simultaneously. The human military advisor stood slowly, his movements economical and precise. "You want to see how humans fight?" he asked in that flat, emotionless tone that made Rolf's scales itch. "I can arrange a demonstration." Broad clicked his mandibles dismissively. "With respect, General, humans are physically inferior to most coalition species. You're smaller, weaker, and your technology is decades behind ours. What possible advantage could you offer?" Quinn's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Play the footage from Sigma Station," he told Tella. The holographic display shifted to show a human squad trapped in a corridor by 30 swarm drones. Coalition doctrine would call for immediate retreat and orbital bombardment. Instead, the humans charged forward. Rolf watched in horror as they crashed directly into the swarm mass, using knives and rifle, but when ammunition ran out. What disturbed him most wasn't the violence. It was the sound. The humans were laughing. "They're insane," Broad whispered. "They're effective," Quinn corrected. "Every human in that footage survived. The swarm didn't. That's the only metric that matters in war." Rolf studied the human general with new appreciation and growing unease. "What would you need to train our forces in your methods?" 2 weeks, 500 of your best troops, and complete operational authority," Quinn responded immediately. "No interference, no questions, and no one leaves training early. If they quit, they stay quit. If they finish, they'll understand why humans win." "And if this fails?" Rolf asked. Quinn's smile was not comforting. "Then you'll lose the war slightly slower than you're currently losing it." Either way, you're out of options, Commander. Rolf looked around the room at exhausted officers from a dozen species, all waiting for someone to offer hope. He thought about the billions of civilians fleeing before the swarm's advance, about the colonies already lost, about the future that was rapidly shrinking to nothing. Authorization granted, he said finally. Lieutenant Broad, select your best warriors. You're going to train with the humans. Broad's antennae twitched in surprise. Sir, I volunteer my entire unit. Good, Quinn said. Tell them to pack light. They won't need much where they're going. He pulled up coordinates on his personal display. Training begins at 0400 hours tomorrow at Luna Base 12. Don't be late. 48 hours later, Broad stood on a barren moon watching 500 elite coalition troops disembark from transports. They'd expected advanced simulation facilities, holographic training rooms, and cutting-edge equipment. Instead, they found obstacle courses carved into rock, weighted packs piled in rows, and weapons that looked ancient by coalition standards. A human wearing faded combat fatigues approached the assembled troops. His name tag read Harris, and his face suggested he'd seen more combat than most species experienced in lifetimes. Welcome to Hell Week, Sergeant Harris announced, his voice carrying across the silent formation. For the next 14 days, I'm going to teach you what humans learned over 200,000 years of evolution. How to hunt, how to kill, and most importantly, how to keep fighting when every logical impulse tells you to quit. He gestured at the obstacle course behind him. That's 15 kilometers of terrain specifically designed to break you. You'll run it every morning before breakfast. You'll run it again after dinner. And if you complain, you'll run it at midnight too. Harris's smile was predatory. Some of you will quit. Most of you will hate me. All of you will understand why humans don't lose to the swarm. Broad felt his certainty wavering as he looked at the humans scattered around the training ground. They were smaller than him, lighter than him, and by every physical metric inferior. But they moved with casual confidence that spoke of absolute certainty in their abilities. They weren't worried about the swarm. They were looking forward to fighting it. Questions? Harris asked the assembled troops. Silence. Good. Then let's see who's still standing when the sun comes up. Harris blew a whistle that shattered the quiet. Move. Broad started running and didn't stop for 14 days. Day 3 of training found Lieutenant Broad questioning every decision that had led him to this moon. His legs burned with exhaustion that his manted physiology shouldn't allow, his breathing ragged despite respiratory systems designed for extreme endurance. Around him, coalition troops from a dozen species were discovering the same uncomfortable truth. Humans operated on a completely different biological framework. The morning run had claimed 37 dropouts before sunrise, not from injury, but from sheer psychological breakdown. Sergeant Harris ran beside them the entire 15 kilometers, never breathing hard, never slowing, occasionally shouting encouragement that sounded more like threats. Pain is weakness leaving the body, he called out as a Saurian warrior collapsed. Get up or get out. What disturbed Broad most wasn't the physical challenge. It was watching humans half his size maintain pace while carrying twice the equipment weight. Private Lewis, barely reaching Broad's chest height, had smiled at him during the 4th kilometer. First time's always rough, she'd said cheerfully. Wait until tomorrow, when your muscles really start screaming. She'd been horrifyingly accurate. Captain Donna Reed stood at the firing range, watching coalition troops attempt human weapons qualification. These rifles are antiques, complained a tech-specialized Avarian, examining the ballistic weapon with obvious disdain. Our plasma systems have 3 times the effective range and require no physical ammunition. Your plasma systems also fail in high radiation environments, need constant power cells, and make you dependent on supply lines, Reed countered. This rifle works in vacuum, underwater, in electromagnetic storms, and will fire until the barrel melts. Simplicity is reliability. She demonstrated by field stripping the weapon in 11 seconds, then reassembling it blindfolded. Your turn. 20 minutes later, not a single coalition soldier had matched her time. The afternoon brought close-quarters combat training, and Broad discovered another unsettling aspect of human warfare. They taught failure. Intentionally. Harris set up scenarios specifically designed to be unwinnable, then watched as coalition troops struggled with hopeless tactical situations. This simulation is impossible. Broad protested after his 10th attempt to rescue civilians from a swarm-infested station ended in complete party wipe. There's no path to victory. Correct, Harris agreed. Now do it again, and this time focus on saving as many civilians as possible before you die. Victory isn't always an option, Lieutenant. Learning to fight effectively while losing is what separates survivors from casualties. The concept violated everything Broad understood about military training. Coalition forces trained to win, to achieve objectives, to minimize losses through superior tactics and technology. Humans trained to keep fighting regardless of outcome. 2. Push forward even when success was mathematically impossible. It was madness. It was also working. By day 5, coalition troops stopped thinking in terms of victory conditions and started thinking in terms of maximum impact. They learned to fight wounded, to operate with degraded equipment, to make decisions under psychological pressure that would paralyze most sentient beings. They learned very slowly to think like humans. The night sessions revealed another dimension of human warfare that left Broad genuinely disturbed. Harris introduced horror scenarios. Darkened corridors filled with sounds of swarm movement, jump scares that triggered every predator avoidance instinct evolution had given them, psychological pressure designed to break rational thought. Most species freeze when afraid. Reed explained as she walked calmly through a simulation filled with holographic swarm warriors. Your brain says run or hide. Humans learn to override that response. We feel the fear, acknowledge it, and use it as fuel. She fired at a swarm drone that materialized from shadows. Adrenaline is a gift. It makes you faster, stronger, more focused, but only if you're trained to weaponize it instead of being controlled by it. Broad tried the same scenario and lasted 90 seconds before his instincts took over and he bolted for the exit. On his 4th attempt, he made it 200 meters. By attempt 12, he was returning fire. The fear never went away, but he was learning to function despite it. General Quinn arrived on day 7 to observe training progress. Only 287 troops remained from the original 500. The rest had quit or been medically discharged after psychological evaluations. Those who remained looked different, moved different. Something fundamental had changed in how they approached combat. Tell me about human military history, Quinn said during the evening briefing, projecting images of ancient Earth battles across the display. Every species eventually evolves past large-scale warfare. You develop diplomatic solutions, find peaceful compromises, learn to resolve conflicts without violence. He showed footage of primitive humans hunting megafauna with nothing but stone-tipped spears. Humans never stopped. We've been at constant war for our entire existence as a species. Peace is the exception. Conflict is our default state. The images shifted to show human conflicts across centuries. Bronze Age warriors, medieval knights, industrial-era soldiers, modern special forces. All different equipment, all identical intensity. You see warfare as something you do when diplomacy fails, Quinn continued. Humans see warfare as another form of communication. We're not good at fighting because we train hard. We're good at it because violence is coded into our DNA. It's not something we do. It's something we are. Broad felt his worldview fracturing as he processed this revelation. Humans weren't advanced warriors. They were evolutionary anachronisms, predators that somehow developed space travel before developing peace. The coalition had built civilization by moving past violence. Humans had built theirs by perfecting it. Day 9 brought the announcement everyone had been dreading. Final examination, Harris declared. You'll be deployed against actual swarm forces. Not simulation, not training. Real combat, real casualties, real consequences. That's insane, protested a Saurian officer. We're not ready for live combat. Harris's expression hardened. You're as ready as you'll ever be, and the swarm isn't going to wait until you feel comfortable. He pulled up mission parameters. Containment facility on Asteroid Research Station 7. 300 swarm drones in a 3-level complex. Your objective is complete elimination. No backup, no rescue, no retreat. Broad's antennae twitched with anticipation rather than fear, and that realization shocked him. 2 weeks ago, this mission would have terrified him. Now, after watching humans charge into impossible situations and emerge victorious, after learning to push past every natural instinct that screamed for survival, he wanted this. He wanted to prove he'd learned their lessons. Equipment loadout is your choice, Reed added. Human weapons or coalition tech. Choose based on mission requirements, not comfort. Remember, reliability matters more than sophistication. Broad chose human ballistic rifles and felt obscurely proud when several other coalition troops did the same. The flight to the asteroid took 6 hours. Broad spent it watching human troops prepare. They checked weapons with practiced efficiency, shared dark jokes about previous missions, sang old Earth songs about death and glory. None of them seemed worried about the 300 swarm drones waiting below. They were excited. "Why do you laugh before battle?" Broad asked Reed as they suited up. She considered the question while chambering rounds. "Because we might die," she said simply. "And if these are our last hours, why spend them afraid? Better to go out laughing than crying." She slapped a fresh magazine into place. "Besides, fear is for prey. We're predators. Time to remind the swarm what that means." The transport doors opened to reveal the dark facility below. Somewhere in those corridors, 300 swarm drones waited. Broad checked his rifle one final time and joined the humans stacking up at the entry point. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled. Fear still whispered at the edges of his consciousness, but it no longer controlled him. "Remember," Harris said over the comm, "no rescue, no retreat, only forward. Make them regret meeting humanity." The doors blew open. Humans poured through screaming war cries, and Broad followed, adding his voice to theirs. The containment facility smelled like death and industrial chemicals. Broad's sensory antennae detected swarm pheromones immediately, that distinctive acidic signature that made every prey instinct scream warnings. 300 drones occupied the levels below, and somewhere in the darkness they were waiting. Human teams spread through the insertion point with practiced efficiency. No hesitation, no final equipment checks. Just immediate forward movement. Captain Reed's voice crackled over. "Comms, Teams Alpha and Beta, take the left corridor. Charlie and Delta, right side. Echo with me down the center. Move fast, hit hard, don't stop." Coalition doctrine would call for methodical clearing, careful advancement, overwhelming firepower at choke points. Humans started running. Broad's team followed Reed into the central passage, and within 30 seconds encountered the first wave. 20 swarm drones erupted from ventilation shafts, their blade limbs gleaming in emergency lighting. Coalition troops formed defensive positions exactly as trained. Humans crashed straight into the swarm mass. Private Lewis reached the first drone before it could fully emerge, driving her combat knife through its sensory cluster while simultaneously firing her rifle one-handed into the next target. She was laughing. The sound echoed through corridors designed for industrial work, now transformed into abattoir, contact front. She shouted cheerfully, "Multiple hostiles. This is going to be fun." Broad watched a human soldier take a blade strike that would have killed most species, grunt in pain, and keep fighting. The man's name tag read Chun, and he'd lost his helmet somewhere in the initial clash. Blood streamed from a scalp wound that should have dropped him unconscious. He used his rifle as a club when ammunition depleted, then switched to a combat knife, then started using swarm corpses as improvised weapons. "They're not stopping," Broad said into his comm, uncertain if he meant the swarm or the humans. Level 1 cleared in 18 minutes. Coalition casualties: 47 wounded, none dead thanks to human medics who seemed to materialize whenever someone fell. Human casualties: 8 wounded, all refusing evacuation. Sergeant Harris's voice was calm over the command channel. "Good initial contact. Swarm is adapting to our presence. Expect heavier resistance on level 2. The adaptation became apparent immediately. Swarm forces had concentrated in the central chamber of level 2, creating a kill zone with overlapping fields of fire. Coalition Point Team triggered the ambush and found themselves surrounded by 200 drones attacking from every direction simultaneously. Broad certainty that they were all about to die lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then humans started singing. You didn't recognize the language, couldn't translate the words, but the melody carried weight of centuries. Other humans joined the song, their voices rising above weapons fire and swarm chittering, and they advanced, not retreating, not taking cover, advancing directly into the mass of blade and acid and death. Reed coordinated the assault through hand signals while firing continuously. Her face showed no fear, only intense concentration and something that looked disturbingly like joy. She pointed at a cluster of drones, and 3 humans converged on it. She gestured at a ventilation shaft, and 2 more humans disappeared into it, hunting flanking drones. Broad found himself charging alongside them. His rational mind screamed that this was suicide, that they should retreat and call for orbital bombardment, that no sane being runs toward overwhelming numbers. His body moved anyway, rifle barking in controlled bursts, blade limbs deflecting off his armor as he learned to dodge with human-taught reflexes. The chamber cleared in 8 minutes, 134 swarm drones eliminated. Coalition troops fought like they never had before, pushing past pain and fear and exhaustion. 0 fatalities, multiple wounded, all still combat effective. Broad's team had taken casualties, but they were still standing, still fighting, still moving forward. "What did you do to us?" Broad demanded of Reed during the brief respite before Level 3. 2 weeks ago, this mission would have been impossible. Now we're winning. Reed checked her ammunition and smiled. "We didn't change you, Lieutenant. We reminded you what you already were. Every sentient species descended from survivors. Your ancestors were predators too, once upon a time. You just forgot." She chambered a fresh round. "Humans never did. We're persistence hunters. We don't stop until the prey stops moving. And we transferred that instinct to warfare." She pulled up historical data on her tactical display. Images of ancient humans chasing megafauna across endless plains, running for days until exhaustion dropped their prey. Humans hunted animals 10 times our size by simply refusing to quit. We'd track them until they collapsed. That same stubbornness applies to combat. The swarm can kill us, but they can't make us stop. Scans showed the swarm queen in the final level, protected by 50 elite warrior drones. These weren't the standard drones from previous encounters. Elite Swarm had armored carapaces, acid spray capability, and enhanced combat algorithms. They'd eliminated Coalition Special Forces teams in past engagements. Coalition doctrine says call orbital strike. Broad observed. Harris checked his weapon and grinned. Human doctrine says we go in and kill her ourselves. Can't let the Navy have all the fun. He stacked his team at the final door. Besides, orbital strikes don't teach the swarm to fear, but walking through their elite guards and killing their queen? That sends a message. The logic was insane. It was also working. The swarm had perfect tactical coordination, superior numbers, biological weapons that dissolved armor, but they'd never faced opponents who treated death as acceptable risk rather than failure condition. Teams positioned at the final entrance. Broad counted his remaining ammunition, checked his suit integrity, and realized he wasn't afraid anymore. Worried, certainly. Aware of the danger, absolutely. But not paralyzed by fear. Humans had taught him something fundamental about combat. You don't fight to survive. You fight to win. Survival is just a bonus. All teams ready. Reed reported. Breach on my mark. Broad's antennae detected swarm movement beyond the door. They knew the coalition forces were coming. Had probably prepared the perfect ambush. Standard response would be caution, reconnaissance, careful tactical planning. Harris blew the doors open and charged and screaming. The Queen's chamber was cathedral-sized, vertical walls providing three-dimensional combat space. Swarm elite. Warriors immediately swarmed human positions from multiple angles. They were bigger, faster, better armored than standard drones. They should have overwhelmed the assault teams in seconds. Humans went vertical. They used equipment as climbing anchors, scaling walls to meet swarm warriors in three-dimensional combat that defied every tactical principle Broad understood. He watched Shin fighting an elite drone on the ceiling. Both combatants grappling, both falling 20 meters to the floor. Chun landed on the drone, used the impact to cushion his fall, and was back up fighting before Broad could process what happened. Private Lewis took acid spray directly to her chest armor. The protective plating melted, burning through to flesh beneath. She screamed, kept firing, dropped the swarm warrior responsible, and only then collapsed. A human medic dragged her to cover while returning fire with his sidearm. The swarm queen released distress pheromones. All elite warriors converged on human positions. This was exactly what Harris wanted. The assault had been bait. Draw defenders away from the queen, create chaos, exploit the gap. It was working, but the cost was devastating. Broad watched humans take casualties that should have ended the fight. Watched them keep moving, keep shooting, keep pushing forward. And he understood finally what made them lethal. They'd already accepted death, walked into every battle knowing they might not walk out. That acceptance freed them from fears. Paralysis, coalition forces, Broad transmitted to his troops, reinforce human positions. Now, his manted warriors hit the swarm flank at maximum velocity, not because tactical doctrine demanded it, because humans had taught them that some things matter more than efficiency. They didn't leave people behind. The queen fell 20 minutes later, Reed's team planting charges on her egg sac, while the massive brawl consumed the chamber. Her death scream drove remaining swarm into frenzy, but without queen coordination, they became chaotic, attacking randomly. The combined coalition human force ground them down systematically. Silence fell. Broad sat against a wall, breathing hard, covered in swarm ichor. Around him, coalition troops and humans alike were checking casualties, treating wounded, securing the area. They'd won. The cost had been terrible, but they'd won. Private Lewis died in the medical bay 3 hours later. Broad sat with her at the end. She smiled despite pain that should have rendered her unconscious. "We won," she whispered. "That's what matters." Broad understood then. Humans weren't better soldiers. They were the only species that measured victory differently. Not by survival, but by objective completion. The mission mattered more than the individuals. And that calculus, however brutal, won wars. 3 days after the containment facility mission, Lieutenant Broad stood in the human medical bay, watching something that defied his understanding of biology. 23 wounded humans occupied recovery beds, and every single one was asking when they could return to duty. Not if. When Corporal Janet Green had lost her left arm below the elbow, the prosthetic attachment wouldn't be ready for another week. She was practicing rifle manipulation with her remaining hand while nurses tried, unsuccessfully, to convince her to rest. "I can still fight," she insisted. "Combat effectiveness reduced by maybe 30%. That's acceptable." "You were nearly killed," Broad said quietly. Green looked at him with those unsettling human eyes that never quite showed the emotion you expected. "Nearly doesn't count, Lieutenant. Either you're dead or you're not." "I'm not, so I'm still useful." She chambered around, one-handed with practiced efficiency. "The swarm doesn't care about my injuries. Why should I?" Captain Reed found Broad an hour later, staring at the memorial wall humans had erected, for names carved into metal. Lewis, Rodriguez, Kim, Patterson. For humans who wouldn't see another sunrise. "It never gets easier," Reed said. "Losing people. Every name on that wall represents someone we failed to bring home. Yet you keep fighting," Broad observed. "What else would we do?" Reed touched Lewis's name gently. She knew the risks, chose to go anyway. Refusing to honor that choice by continuing the mission would be the real failure. She turned to face Broad. "You asked me once how humans accept the cost. The truth is we don't. We carry it. Every loss, every casualty, every decision that traded lives for objectives. But we carry it forward, not as weight that stops us, but as fuel that drives us." Broad had submitted his combat assessment to Coalition Command. The response came faster than expected. Emergency meeting at headquarters, all senior officers attending. Human advisors requested. The transport ride gave him time to review his own words. What he'd written seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Commander Rolfe opened the meeting by playing full footage from the containment facility assault. Coalition officers watched in silence as humans executed tactics that violated every principle of warfare they understood. The final casualty count appeared on screen. Coalition forces, 89 wounded, 12 dead. Human forces, 23 wounded for dead. By our standards, those are catastrophic losses, Rolf said heavily. By human standards, General Quinn informs me this qualifies as overwhelming victory. He looked at Quinn. Explain that calculation. Quinn stood, his movements precise, as always. Coalition doctrine prioritizes force preservation. You fight to minimize casualties. Humans fight to achieve objectives. Casualties are acceptable if the mission succeeds. He pulled up comparative data. In the past year, coalition forces have won 63% of engagements against the swarm while suffering 48% average casualties. Humans have won 97% of engagements while suffering 62% average casualties. You're losing more people, protested an Avarian admiral. We're winning more battles, Quinn corrected. And in war, that's the only metric that ultimately matters. Dead soldiers can be replaced. Lost territory cannot be easily recovered. The swarm understands this. They accept horrific casualties to achieve territorial gains. Humans simply accept even higher casualties to deny them those gains. Broad stood. Permission to present my findings, Commander? Rolf gestured approval. Broad activated his tactical analysis. After extensive combat alongside human forces, I've identified why they're effective against the swarm. It's not superior technology, training, or tactics. It's psychology. He showed neurological scans. Human brains are wired differently. When faced with overwhelming threat, most species experience fear response that triggers retreat or surrender. Humans experience the same fear, but their response is aggression. He pulled up historical data. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a death world. Their planet has 16 distinct biomes, all hostile. Megafauna predators, environmental extremes, disease, parasites. Human evolution favored those who fought back rather than fled. Over 200,000 years, this created a species that literally cannot surrender. Their biology won't allow it. The implications settled over the room like a blast wave. Ambassador Tella spoke carefully. You're saying humans are biologically programmed for warfare? I'm saying humans never evolved past it, Broad corrected. Every other coalition species develops civilization by moving beyond violence. Humans develop civilization while remaining violent. War isn't something they learned. It's coded into their DNA. He showed footage of human historical conflicts, constant warfare for their entire existence as a species. They've never known true peace. General Quinn didn't dispute the assessment. Lieutenant Broad is correct. Humanity's greatest strength is also our greatest flaw. We're exceptionally good at killing because we've been doing it since we climbed down from trees. That makes us useful allies and potentially dangerous friends. The swarm, Rolf said slowly, uses hive mind coordination to predict enemy behavior. They analyze tactical patterns and adapt. How do they handle human unpredictability? Broad displayed combat telemetry from the facility assault. They can't. Swarm algorithms assume rational actors. Humans are fundamentally irrational in combat. They fight harder when wounded, laugh when dying, attack when outnumbered. The swarm's evolutionary advantage becomes a liability against opponents who don't follow predictable patterns. Quinn nodded. The swarm optimized for fighting logical species. Humans aren't logical in combat. We're emotional, impulsive, and occasionally suicidal. That's not a bug in our programming. It's a feature. The room fell silent as everyone processed this revelation. Finally, Rolf spoke. So the galaxy's best weapon against an unstoppable hive mind is a species too stubborn to know when they're beaten? Essentially, yes, Quinn agreed. That's horrifying, Tello whispered. That's survival, Reed countered from the back of the room. The swarm is destroying the coalition because you fight rationally. You calculate acceptable losses, strategic withdrawals, cost-benefit analysis. Humans don't. We fight until we win or we're all dead. There's no middle ground. That simplicity makes us predictable in one way. The swarm knows we won't quit, but it also means they can't outlast us because we'll keep Coming forever. Commander Rolf stood slowly. The swarm has launched a major offensive. 50 worlds under attack. Coalition projects total defeat within 3 weeks. He looked directly at Quinn. Can humans save us? Quinn's expression didn't change. How many do you need? All of them, Rolf said honestly. Quinn pulled up mobilization orders already prepared. 50,000 troops boarding transports now. All volunteers. All fully briefed on casualty projections. All going anyway. He met Rolf's gaze. Humans don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because someone has to. And we're the only species crazy enough to think we can win. Broad watched the human transport fleet assembling in orbit. 50,000 soldiers heading towards certain casualties, probable death and possible victory. They knew the odds, didn't care, would go anyway because that's what humans did. They were the galaxy's weapon, forged by evolution, tempered by endless warfare, unleashed against enemies that threatened civilization. What happens after the swarm? Broad asked Quinn quietly. When there's no enemy left to fight? Quinn's smile was sad. We'll find one, Lieutenant. We always do. Humanity has never known peace. Only pauses between wars. The galaxy needs us now. But someday, you'll need protection from us too. He turned to watch his troops boarding. We're monsters. Just remember what we are when the current crisis ends. Broad understood. The Coalition was unleashing something they couldn't control. Humans would save them from the swarm. But human nature meant the violence would never truly end. They were making a deal with predators. Necessary now, potentially catastrophic later. For what it's worth, Broad said, I'm glad you're on our side. Quinn nodded. So are we, Lieutenant. So are we. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. 50,000 humans heading toward war. 50 worlds burning under swarm assault. And somewhere in the void between stars, 2 species were about to discover what happened when unstoppable force met immovable stubbornness. Broad returned to his quarters and began writing deployment orders for coalition forces. They'd learned human tactics. Now they'd fight alongside humans in the largest engagement the galaxy had seen. Win or lose, nothing would ever be the same. He thought about Private Lewis dying with a smile, about Corporal Green practicing one-handed weapons drill, about humans who measured victory by objectives rather than survival. The galaxy had spent centuries building civilization through cooperation and rationality. Now they were learning that. Sometimes you needed something irrational to survive, something that fought not because it made sense, but because it refused to quit. Something human. The galaxy burned. 50 worlds under simultaneous swarm assault, billions of refugees fleeing before the advancing hive, coalition forces retreating on every front. Commander Rahl stared at the strategic display and watched civilization collapse in real time. 3 weeks ago, this would have been unthinkable. Now it was reality. Human fleet emerging from hyperspace, announced tactical officer. 200 ships materialized in perfect formation, and Rolf felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not certainty, not confidence, but the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't lose everything. General Quinn entered the war room without ceremony. Strategic overview, he requested. Rolf highlighted 50 combat zones, simultaneous attacks. Swarm is committing everything to this offensive. They know we're broken. This is the killing blow. He pulled up casualty projections. We'll lose 90% of defending forces within 72 hours, total civilian. Casualties estimated at 15 billion. Unacceptable, Quinn said flatly. He activated his own tactical plan. Coalition officers leaned forward, expecting defensive strategy, fortification of core worlds, calculated retreat. Quinn's plan showed the opposite. We attack everywhere simultaneously. That's insane, protested an Avarian admiral. You'd spread forces too thin. Each zone would have only 1,000 humans against millions of swarm. Quinn's expression didn't change. Exactly, swarm. Hive mind requires coordination, predictability. We're going to create chaos on every front simultaneously. Force them to divide attention. Respond to threats across 50 systems. Fight human style instead of swarm style. He pulled up deployment schedules. Small teams embedded with coalition defenders. Orders are simple. Cause maximum disruption. Never stop moving. Make them afraid. The swarm doesn't feel fear, Rolf said. They will, Quinn promised. Lieutenant Broad deployed with Captain Reed's company to Threshold, an industrial world with 40 million citizens and dwindling time. 90% had evacuated. The remaining defenders, 5,000 coalition troops and 200 humans. Mission: hold the capital spaceport for 48 hours while final evacuation ships launched. Swarm forces, 500,000 drones. 3 queens. Victory was mathematically impossible. Standard defensive perimeter, suggested a Saurian colonel, pointing at the spaceport boundaries. Sergeant Harris rejected this immediately. Defense is just slow defeat. We attack. He highlighted targets deep in swarm-controlled territory. We find the queens and kill them. Without coordination, the swarm collapses. You'll be outnumbered 1,000 to 1, Broad said. Harris smiled. So, we've faced worse odds. He began issuing orders, hit-and-run raids, demolitions, targeted assassinations. Make them respond to us. Keep them off balance. Remember your training. Pain is temporary. Death is permanent. And the mission matters more than individuals. Broad remembered. They all did. 2 weeks of human instruction had fundamentally changed how coalition forces approach combat. They still felt fear, still understood the danger, but they'd learned to push past it, to function, despite biological imperatives screaming for survival. Hour 0. Human teams launched into swarm territory. Broad's mixed coalition human unit hit a swarm staging area, planted demolitions, and extracted before response forces arrived. The explosion killed hundreds of drones. More importantly, it announced human presence. The swarm knew they were there now. Hour 12. First queen located through aggressive reconnaissance. 50 humans versus 10,000 swarm protecting her nest. Coalition. Doctrine called this suicide. Humans called it Tuesday. Broad watched the assault unfold through tactical feeds. Humans using every lesson they'd taught. Moving fast, hitting hard, accepting casualties as necessary cost. 31 humans survived the queen kill. 19 didn't. The queen died screaming. Her swarm forces went berserk without coordination. Hour 24. Broad's unit was operating deep in enemy territory when they encountered a swarm ambush. 20 troops versus 200 drones. His manted instincts said retreat. Human training said attack. He charged forward screaming, and his unit followed. They broke through the ambush in 4 minutes. Broad lost his rifle, used a blade, lost that too, started fighting with his bare limbs. A swarm warrior tore in his side, and he felt ribs crack. Kept fighting, because that's what humans taught. You don't stop until the enemy stops. Captain Reed found him afterwards, applying field dressings to wounds that should have killed him. Proud of you, Lieutenant, she said. You learned well. Broad realized he was laughing. Despite pain, despite exhaustion, despite knowing they were probably all going to die anyway. He was laughing because humans had taught him that too. If these were the last hours, spend them defiant rather than afraid. Hour 36. Second queen dead. Human casualties at 67%. They kept attacking. Swarm forces consolidating around final queen. This was the moment. All or nothing. Win or die trying. Broad led the final assault alongside human troops he'd come to respect more than he'd thought possible. They crashed into swarm defenses with suicidal courage that no longer seemed insane. It seemed necessary. The only viable response to overwhelming odds. Reed reached the queen's chamber. Got impaled by a warrior drone's blade limb. Didn't stop. Planted demolition charges with shaking hands. Looked at Broad and smiled. Tell them we held, she whispered, then detonated. The queen's death cry shattered across swarm communication networks. Without her coordination, the remaining forces on Threshold collapsed into chaos. Disorganized mobs that coalition troops systematically eliminated. They'd won. Broad held Reed's body and felt something break inside him. Not despair. Rage, pure, focused, human-taught rage at an enemy that killed people he'd learned to care about. He understood finally why humans were so effective. They didn't fight for abstract concepts like territory or resources. They fought for each other, and that made them unstoppable. 48 hours after deployment, all civilians evacuated. Threshold lost, but population saved. Human survivors, 41 out of 200. Coalition survivors, 2,300 out of 5,000. By traditional metrics, catastrophic. By human metrics, overwhelming victory. Across 50 worlds, the pattern repeated. Small human forces creating disproportionate chaos. Swarm offensive broken. 31 queens killed. Human casualties at 71% across all theaters. Coalition casualties at 45%. Lowest ever against the swarm. Ambassador Tella presented findings to the Galactic Council 3 weeks later. Analysis confirms that humans didn't defeat the swarm through superior technology or tactics. They defeated them through psychology. She displayed neurological data. The swarm hive mind literally cannot process human behavior. Their algorithms assume rational actors. Humans are fundamentally irrational in combat. They fight harder when wounded, advance when surrounded, laugh when dying. She pulled up historical analysis. Every coalition species evolved past large-scale violence. We developed civilization by moving beyond warfare. Humans developed civilization while remaining warriors. They're evolutionary anachronisms. Predators that somehow reach space without losing predator instincts. Commander Rolth addressed the council directly. The question before us is simple. What do we do with 50,000 humans who just saved the galaxy? He paused. They're volunteers. They can leave anytime. But General Quinn has proposed a solution. Quinn stood. Humanity offers to serve as the coalition's permanent military force. We'll deploy wherever needed, fight whatever threatens civilization, accept casualties that other species cannot. In exchange, we ask for resources to maintain our forces and recognition that we're doing a job nobody else wants. You're asking to become the galaxy's soldiers, an Avarian counselor said slowly. We're offering to be your monsters, Quinn corrected, pointed outward, fighting enemies that threaten everyone. Keep us deployed, keep us engaged, and we'll protect what you've built. His expression hardened. The alternative is we go home and eventually find new enemies. Human nature means we'll fight someone. Better it's your enemies than you. The threat wasn't subtle. Accept human protection or eventually face human aggression. The council debated for hours, finally approved the proposal. Humanity became the coalition's official military force. 10 years later, the swarm was extinct. New threat emerging from galactic core. Coalition immediately requested human deployment. 100,000 volunteers in the first week. Broad, now General, commanded Joint Task Force alongside human advisors. Are you ready for another war? Asked the human liaison. Broad checked his rifle and smiled. I'll learn from the best. Let's end this. He looked at human troops preparing for deployment. They were excited, not afraid. Ready to fight impossible odds because that's what they did. The galaxy had learned an uncomfortable truth. Civilization required cooperation, diplomacy, rational thought. But survival sometimes required something else. Something that refused to quit when logic said the fight was lost. Something that measured victory by objective completion rather than casualty counts. Something human. They created a weapon, biological, psychological, unstoppable. Pointed it at their enemies and watched those enemies break. The weapon would never truly rest. Human nature wouldn't allow it. But as long as threats existed, the galaxy had defenders willing to pay any price. Broad watched the combined fleet jump to hyperspace. Humans leading the way. As always, because some species evolved to build civilizations. Some evolved to defend them. Humanity was the second kind. The galaxy's most lethal fighters. Not despite their flaws. Because of them.